Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The 1937 address by Nikolai Ivanovich Vavilov, titled The Origin, Variation, Immunity and Breeding of Cultivated Plants, represents a profound synthesis of a life dedicated to the systematic exploration of the planet's botanical wealth, delivered at the International Congress of Genetics in Edinburgh and published thereafter. This work stands, as the capstone of his theoretical and practical contributions, a comprehensive articulation of a research program on a scale previously unimagined. It is a document born of immense fieldwork, rigorous observation, and a powerful creative intellect seeking to uncover the fundamental laws governing the evolution of the plants upon which humanity depends. This essay undertakes a direct and systematic evaluation of the internal claims, frameworks, and evidentiary foundations presented within this seminal work. We will proceed through the logical architecture of Vavilov's argument, examining each component part to assess its coherence. The strength of its supporting data is presented, and its overall contribution to the edifice of his grand theory. The objective is to comprehend the work from within, appreciating its intellectual machinery, and the specific claims it forwards as a scientific paradigm intended to transform both evolutionary biology and agricultural practice. Section 1. The reconceptualization of the Linnaean species as a polymorphic system. Vavilov initiates his discourse, advancing a foundational claim regarding the nature of the species itself. He posits that the Linnaean species, far from being a static or uniform type, is a complex and internally differentiated system, characterized by a vast and dynamic polymorphism. The essay evaluates this initial proposition as the epistemological cornerstone for all subsequent arguments. Vavilov's evidence for this claim is primarily drawn from his extensive geographical surveys. He details observing immense morphological and physiological diversity within single species of wheat, barley, and legumes across different environments. He argues that this variation is neither random nor chaotic. It is structured and geographically localized. The evaluation of his methodology here centers on his use of comparative morphology at an unprecedented scale. He documents variations in plant height, ear shape, grain color, flowering time, and resistance to environmental stresses. The strength of his claim rests upon the sheer volume of his collected data, a global herbarium and seed bank that functioned as his laboratory. He effectively reframes the species concept from a typological one to a population-based, dynamic one. The internal logic is compelling. To understand the origin of cultivated plants, one must first recognize that the fundamental unit of analysis, the species, is a vibrant repository of countless heritable traits, or what he terms elements. This conceptual expansion is presented as a necessary prolegomena to any scientific approach to plant breeding, which he defines as the deliberate manipulation of this intraspecific diversity. Section 2. The centers of origin as primary foci of genetic diversity. Building upon his dynamic species concept, Vavilov presents his most celebrated thesis, the theory of the centers of origin of cultivated plants. He claims to have identified a limited number of geographical regions, approximately 8 in this 1937 formulation, which served as the primary cradles of agriculture and the principal repositories of plant genetic diversity. The essay's evaluation of this section focuses on the criteria and evidence he employs to delineate these centers. Vavilov proposes a tripartite method of identification. The first criterion is the presence of an extraordinary concentration of varieties and forms of a given crop. The mountains of Abyssinia, for instance, are presented as containing a staggering diversity of wheat forms found nowhere else. The second criterion is the collocation of numerous wild relatives of the cultivated plant, which he interprets as the ancestral gene pool from which the crop was domesticated. The third and more theoretically nuanced criterion is the prevalence of dominant alleles within the center. He posits that evolutionary progression often leads to the accumulation of recessive traits at the periphery of a species' range, making the geographical locus of dominant genes a strong indicator of its origin. The claim is that these three lines of evidence converge on the same geographical areas, such as the Andes for the potato, Central Asia for soft wheats, and the Mediterranean for many vegetables. An assessment of his evidence as presented in the paper reveals a powerful correlational argument. The maps and lists he provides are extensive, linking specific crops to specific mountain valleys and plateaus. The internal coherence of the claim is strong, as it provides a unifying explanation for the global distribution of agricultural biodiversity. It transforms the world map from a political or topographical surface into a genetic one, with hotspots of evolutionary creativity. This section posits a clear, testable hypothesis about the structure of global biodiversity and its historical relationship with human civilization. Section 3, the law of homologous series in variation. Here, Vavilov advances his most ambitious theoretical generalization. The law of homologous series in variation. He claims that closely related species and genera are characterized by parallel series of heritable variation. This parallelism, he argues, is so regular that the discovery of a specific trait in one species allows a researcher to predict its probable existence in related species. The essay's evaluation of this claim examines its formulation as a biological law and the nature of the evidence provided. Vavilov presents this principle as a tool for systematic discovery. Likening it to a periodic table for biological forms, his evidence consists of extensive tables comparing traits across different genera within a family. For example, he illustrates that the series of traits for air color, grain texture, and organ development observed in wheat shows a striking parallel to the series found in barley and rye. He extends this to the Leguminosae and other families, showing parallelisms in seed shape, flower color, and pod morphology. Critically assessing this claim involves understanding its proposed mechanism. Vavilov attributes this parallelism to the shared genetic architecture inherited from a common ancestor. The homologous genes controlling these traits, when mutated, give rise to similar phenotypic outcomes across different lineages. The intellectual power of the claim is its predictive capacity. A plant breeder, having identified a desirable recessive trait like gluten-free grains in one species of grass, could use the law to guide a targeted search for a similar trait in a related but more commercially viable species like wheat. The presentation frames this as a fundamental rule of evolutionary development, a regularity that brings order to the seemingly endless profusion of biological forms. The work subtly suggests that variation is not infinite, it is channeled along specific, predictable pathways determined by a shared genetic heritage. Section 4, geographical regularities and the distribution of intraspecific diversity. This portion of the work elaborates on the geographical dimensions of variation, moving from the macro level of the centers of origin to the micro level of trait distribution. Vavilov claims that clear geographical principles govern the distribution of intraspecific diversity radiating from the primary centers. A key argument evaluated here is his observation that dominant genes for many traits are concentrated in the center of origin, while a higher frequency of recessive forms is found at the periphery of the crop's range and in isolated, marginal environments. He provides examples from his expeditions, noting how forms of wheat in the main Abyssinian center are predominantly resistant to certain rusts, a dominant trait, whereas susceptible forms become more common in outlying areas. Similarly, he documents how primitive, small-seeded forms of legumes are found in the core areas, with larger-seeded, more advanced forms appearing further afield. The evaluation of this claim must consider the mechanism he implies. While not fully articulated in modern population genetics terms, his reasoning points towards processes of selection and genetic drift. The core area represents a zone of high competition and co-evolutionary pressure, favoring robust, dominant traits. As human migration carries these plants to new, often less demanding or more isolated environments. Founder effects and different selective pressures allow for the emergence and fixation of recessive traits and may have been masked in the ancestral population. The strength of this claim lies in its empirical grounding in his vast collection data. He is essentially describing patterns that would later be explained more formally by population geneticists. He presents a model where the center of origin acts as an evolutionary engine, generating diversity that is then sorted and filtered by geography and human cultivation, creating predictable patterns of genetic variation across the landscape. This transforms the centers of origin from static museums into dynamic wellsprings whose output is geographically structured. Section 5. The coevolution of host immunity and pathogen virulence. Vavilov dedicates a significant section to the topic of immunity, a subject of immense practical importance for plant breeding. He puts forth the critical claim that the centers of origin for cultivated plants are simultaneously the centers of origin for their specialized pathogens. The direct consequence of this, he argues, is that these same centers of plant diversity are the richest sources of genes for disease resistance. The essay's evaluation focuses on this coevolutionary hypothesis and its implications. Vavilov's evidence is again geographical and observational. He documents that the most diverse and virulent populations of wheat stem rust, for example, are found in the very same regions, like Abyssinia and the Near East, that harbour the greatest diversity of wheat. He interprets this not as a coincidence, but as the signature of a long-standing evolutionary arms race. In these regions, the host plants and their pathogens have been locked in a continuous cycle of adaptation and counter-adaptation for millennia, leading to the accumulation of a vast arsenal of resistance genes in the host population and virulence genes in the pathogen population. The internal logic of this claim is exceptionally powerful for breeding applications. It suggests that the problem of crop disease, which might seem like a random misfortune, has a predictable geographical structure. To find resistance to a specific fungal pathogen or insect pest, a breeder should, according to Vavilov, launch an expedition to the center of origin of the crop in question. There, amidst the high prevalence of the disease, one is most likely to find individual plants that have evolved effective defenses. This claim reframes phytopathology within an evolutionary and geographical context, providing a clear and rational strategy for finding the genetic tools to protect the world's food supply. It is a direct application of his theoretical framework to one of agriculture's most pressing challenges. Section 6. A scientific foundation for plant breeding and germplasm collection. The concluding section of Vavilov's work consolidates all previous claims into a unified, actionable program for the future of plant breeding. He argues that the principles of phytogeography, the law of homologous series, and the coevolution of immunity provide, for the first time, a truly scientific basis for crop improvement. The essay evaluates this final claim as the ultimate justification for his entire research enterprise. He contrasts his systematic approach with the preceding methods of plant introduction, which he characterizes as often haphazard and reliant on chance. His proposed methodology is deliberate and theory-driven. It begins with a clear objective: a breeder might require drought tolerance for wheat in a specific region. Using the law of homologous series, the breeder would identify all related grass species known to possess drought-tolerant traits. Guided by the theory of centers of origin, the breeder would then pinpoint the specific geographical areas, perhaps the arid highlands of Afghanistan, where the genetic diversity for this trait is likely to be concentrated. An expedition would be dispatched with the explicit goal of collecting germplasm carrying these specific genes. This collected material would then be used in hybridization programs to transfer the desired trait into elite cultivars. The strength of this concluding argument is its synthesis of pure and applied science. It presents a clear workflow from theoretical understanding to tangible agricultural innovation. The evaluation confirms that Vavilov saw his work As providing more than an interesting historical account of plant origins, he saw it as a predictive, powerful tool for engineering the future of agriculture. His vast seed bank was therefore a living library of genetic solutions, indexed by geography and evolutionary law, ready to be deployed to meet human needs. His final claim is that a deep understanding of the past evolution of our crops is the most effective guide for their future development. In conclusion, a meticulous evaluation of the internal claims within Nikolai Vavilov's 1937 masterpiece, The Origin, Variation, Immunity and Breeding of Cultivated Plants, reveals a work of extraordinary intellectual architecture. Each section builds logically upon the last, from the fundamental redefinition of the species as a dynamic system to the grand synthesis of a scientific breeding program. His claim for the centers of origin, supported by his tripartite method of analysis, provided a geographical map for genetic diversity. The law of homologous series, in turn, offered a predictive compass for navigating that diversity, suggesting a deep, underlying order in evolution. His insight into the geographical distribution of traits and the coevolution of hosts and pathogens furnished a rational basis for tackling problems of adaptation and immunity. The evidence he marshalled, drawn from unprecedented global expeditions, gave his claims a profound empirical weight, even if the theoretical mechanisms would be more fully elaborated by later generations of scientists. The work's enduring significance resides in its successful fusion of evolutionary theory, genetics, geography, and practical agronomy. It established a paradigm for viewing crop diversity as a structured, discoverable, and ultimately manageable resource. The 1937 address is the definitive statement of a research program that fundamentally altered our understanding of agricultural origins and provided a systematic blueprint for securing the future of human sustenance, a blueprint whose core principles continue to inform the conservation and utilization of plant genetic resources worldwide.
We really appreciate you tuning into this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.